We left off last week in the middle of we had started chapter 5, and we left off just before verse 6. Just one thing I want to mention, something that I just read, which I really like, so I want to mention it. That we talked about last week in the first few verses of chapter 5. Basically, we're dealing with a crowning of David as king. And we talked about the fact that while he had already been anointed of God, but this is an opportunity where the nation itself comes together and of their own initiative says, yes, we want you to be our king. And there's also this pact or this treaty that is, or covenant or whatever, that is made between them. And they indeed anoint him king, the people. But then I read this is actually, I had taken a course in Samuel like years ago, and I every so often I go back and I read my notes to see if there's something there that would be of an insight. So this was very interesting. And what he noted here was the fact that you would expect that the crowning of David would involve a lot more pomp and circumstance, which it did for Saul. If you remember, there was offerings and it was a big deal. Here, it's just like they come together, they make a pact, and they anointed him king. End of story. So if you'll notice in Chronicles 1, First Chronicles, chapter 11, okay, we have the exact same, you know how Chronicles really mirrors the stories in Samuel and Kings, but there's some differences, okay? So here you have a difference, okay? So this is Chronicles 1, chapter 11. And let us look at just the beginning of that chapter, okay? And we have the beginning of the chapter is very similar to what we have, almost the exact same words. All Israel gathered to David at Hebron and said, we're your own flesh and blood, blah, blah, blah. And the end of it, verse 3, and they anointed David king over Israel according to the word of the Lord through Samuel. Very, very similar language, very similar action, okay? And then the next part of the chapter goes on to a story that we're going to read next. But then look at verse 11. All of a sudden in verse 11, in verse 10, we have a different verse that we don't see. And these were David's chief warriors who strongly supported him in his kingdom, together with all Israel, to make him king, according to the word of the Lord concerning Israel. Okay. The next verse, verse 11, this is the list of David's warriors. Okay. So verse 10 is actually extra. It's we don't need it. It's redundant because we already have, starting in verse 11, these are the list of the warriors, and then we have names. This guy, this guy, this guy, and many of these people. When we have the names of all these people, they will also tell us they were with David from this time, they were with David from that time. Okay, so starting in verse 11, you get a sense that it's a list of his army and his, let's say, his general staff, his chief generals, his chief commanders, okay, and where they're from and who they're responsible for. Okay, so verse 10 is a little funny because first of all, it says these are his chief warriors, but the statement itself is a little different. It says, who strongly supported him in his kingdom, okay? In his, not just kingdom, in his becoming king, in his being a king is a better way of saying it, okay? And then it says at the end, to make him king, to crown him king. So what this teacher of mine commented about this, he says this kind of, as Chronicles is retelling the story, Chronicles is actually written during the Second Temple period, okay? And so it's using sources like Samuel, but it's retelling the story, giving different emphasis sometimes. And it seems here what they're doing is they're adding this line as if to say they felt in Samuel there wasn't enough pomp and circumstance involved. And so here it's adding the sentence just to say, no, there were all these heroes that helped strengthen his kingdom that were there to make him king. So it wasn't just Israel, but there were some decorated military heroes, so to speak. If you picture it, you got the guys with all the medals on their chests standing next to David. It suddenly looks a lot more of a wealthy thing. Now, I'm sure that was going on, but it's like in 2 Samuel, it's a very muted, not formal kind of thing. whereas in Chronicles now could be that, the whole book of Chronicles is a very different book in that says, like, I talked about how it says a lot of what we have in Kings, except what it doesn't have. It has nothing about the kingdom of Israel, the northern kingdom. And it's only about the kingdom of Judah. And Chronicles itself, its whole point is to talk about and focus on the house of David. And it makes sense because by the time we're in the Second Temple period, the kingdom of Israel is gone and they're no longer relevant. And so it's a way to focus during that period on, let's look at what the house of David was doing, because the house of David is what's important. So it's consistent in that, let's talk about the house of David. He wasn't just this fellow who a bunch of people said, okay, let's be king, you can be king, but there was some, there was some glory there was something fancy. And so that makes sense that they felt the need at that point to add that little detail. Anyway, so that's that. Let's move on to the rest of the story. So we are in verse 6, and here we're starting David is king, and we're going to start seeing certain things that he does. And the beginning, of course, is the most important, the most critical. And here also we have to wonder, it seems to be very downpan, very deadpan, the way it's talked about. This is Jerusalem. We are now going to be reading about how David conquers Jerusalem. And of course, Jerusalem, because is enormous. Keep in mind that the conquest of Jerusalem is it's interesting, but it's not a big deal. What is the big deal, which we're going to study soon? The bringing of the ark to Jerusalem. There are many verses discussed, and I think that tells us something about what Jerusalem really is supposed to mean. Jerusalem is not just a capital. It's not London or Paris or Rome or Washington, D.C. Okay, there's something very spiritual and holy about Jerusalem, and therefore the scripture is going to focus much more on things having to do with bringing the ark to Jerusalem and how that needed to be done and how it shouldn't have been done. And that's a whole issue that we will then study, much more than the actual conquest of Jerusalem, which seems to be more like a footnote than anything else. If it's an important part of the story, because the rest of the story can't happen if David doesn't actually conquer Jerusalem. But anyway, that's just an introduction. So let's read what's here. We're starting with verse 6. The king and his men set out for Jerusalem against the Jebusites who inhabited the region, or to the Jebusites who inhabited the region. Jerusalem at that point, by the way, is not really called Jerusalem, although there is one place in Judges that Jerusalem is mentioned, and it may be that the name of the city already existed, but it was also called Jebus because it was the Jebusites who were there. And there's theories that there was a tiny little Jerusalem outside of the Jebusite area, a little village or so next to Jebusite. And there's just also a sense that Jerusalem didn't mean that much, but it became, because, for example, in the time of Abraham meets a king, Melchizedek, who is the king of Salem. And it's fairly clear that Salem and Jerusalem are the same. So it would have been called Salem in ancient times. So it could be that it was called Jerusalem, but it's also much more widely referred to in these books, Joshua, Judges, and Samuel, as Jebus, because it was a Jebusite city. It becomes Jerusalem precious to us right here. This is what we're going to be studying. Okay, so he goes to the Jebusites. He's starting to prepare to go towards the Jebusites. And what happens? The Jebusites, David was told, okay, the Jebusites basically send a message to David: you will never get in here. You're not going to succeed. Even the blind and the lame will turn you back. They meant David will never enter here. Okay. This is very interesting. The English translation actually includes interpretation, not just a translation, because the words itself are very difficult. Not that the words are difficult, like what is supposed to mean. If I translate the Hebrew literally, it would say as follows: and they said to David, saying. Okay, that's also weird. They said to David, saying. Maybe it means they sent a message, and this is the quote of the message. Okay, you will not come here unless you remove the blind and the lame. Saying, David will not come, will never enter here. Okay, so when they have the second saying, in my Bible in English, it says in parentheses, they meant David will never enter here. This is indeed one way of interpreting this whole thing. What does that mean? You cannot come here unless you remove the blind and the lame. The blind and the lame. What is this? And why does that become a condition for David's success to come in? And when they then saying you won't come here, basically what they're trying to say, there's no way you will manage to remove the blind and the lame, and therefore you will never enter here. Okay, who are the blind and the lame? What is this? Okay, if you think about it, the blind and the lame are usually the weakest members of society. So if you're going to a king who has great military experience and you're going to tell him your biggest challenge are the blind and the lame, they're going to think you're crazy. Tell me my biggest challenge is a Goliath-sized giant. Okay, I get it. That's a big challenge, but why is the blind and the lame a challenge? Okay, we'll continue reading a little bit, and then we'll start talking about ways of looking at this. But David captured the stronghold of Zion. It is now the city of David. On that occasion, okay, so we're going to find out afterwards, starting in verse 9, we're actually going to see how did he capture it. But here, these first verses kind of summarizes it all, okay? So on that occasion, on the occasion of David succeeding, despite the warning of the Jebusites, when he succeeded, David said, those who attack the Jebusites shall reach the water channel and strike down the lame and the blind who are hateful to David. That is why they say, no one who is blind or lame may enter the house. What the heck is going on here, you know? Okay, so first of all, it seems here, first of all, in verse 7, we learn that we get to the end of the book first, okay, the end of the story. Yeah, he succeeded. Despite the lame. How did he do it? So first of all, he made an announcement to all his armed forces. Those who attack, or he who attacks, or anyone who attacks the Jebusite, okay, and touches here the English said water channel. How did we get to the explanation of water channel? The truth of the matter is the word in Hebrew is a tsinor. Tsinor is the modern Hebrew word for a water pipe. You know, if you go to your plumber and you dig up your pipes, that's called a tsinor, a water pipe. But the truth of the matter is this Hebrew word tsinor is only here in the Bible, and it was unclear what was this, what did it mean? And I think people had a sense it had something to do with water, but they didn't really know what it was. Very interesting thing happened. I don't know if any of you have been to Jerusalem, if any of you have gone to the city of David and taken tours there. So there's been enormous discoveries in recent years there about different things, but already going back, I don't know, 100 years ago or something, there was a British fellow whose name was Warren, and he discovered a shaft, and it's called the Warren Shaft. And that was the first indication that there was an ancient water system that enabled the people of the city to access water from an underground channel of some sort. More recently, as the work of many of the archaeologists has continued in the city of David, they have found beyond that Warren Shaft, they have found enormous systems of underground tunnels, okay, that connect from the Gihon Spring, which is down below, all the way up to what have been the city. And in fact, on Passover, my husband Ed and I took a tour of the city of David. We've been there a number of times, but it's all every few years you have to go because it's all, you know, stuff. And this time we went, I had done this before. I don't think my husband had. We walked in this underground, what was actually a drainage tunnel in the Second Temple period. You're walking under a road, and the road that you're under was actually only recently discovered and dug out completely, but it's not yet open for the public. We can't wait until it's open for the public. But down in the drainage thing, you can do this whole walk, which leads you out to right at the Western Wall, right like around the corner from the Western Wall. Okay, so that's from the Second Temple period, but there were similar paths in different places. They found things that date back to the First Temple period and to King David's period. So the thought is, what is going on? He says, if you anyone he's basically giving them how are you going to strike the Jebusites? You're going to have to go through the water channel. And indeed, what archaeologists are thinking is that not just during David's time, but at other times, the water channels were ways the people could get in and out of the city, even if it was under siege, because you bypass the siege by going in a water tunnel of this sort. And so that is what people believe is this is talking about. He's saying, well, how are you going to capture the Jebusite? How will you strike the Jebusite? You're going to have to go through this water channel, okay? And then it talks about, and the lame and the blind. The idea here is that the first thing, all who strikes a Jebusite will touch the water channel, and as if you're saying all who strike the lame and the blind. Now, all who strike the Jebusite and the lame of the blind. It's as if the touch the water channel is kind of in parentheses there. That's how you're going to do it, but it's together, all who strike the Jebusite, all who strike the lame and the blind, which also leads people to think that the lame and the blind may be, in this case, a derogatory way of David to refer to the Jebusites. Okay? Now, and it could be, it's repeating basically what they said. The Jebusites said, you're not going to succeed in capturing the city unless you can get past the lame and the blind. And then here, David is basically saying, oh, you Jebusites, you're all lame and blind. In other words, they're making fun of him, he's making fun of them. But what is this lame and blind thing? Okay, so there's different opinions. One opinion said, well, a lame person by himself is not going to be a very effective guard because he can't walk, and a blind person is not going to be a very effective person because they can't see. But what if you put them together? What if the lame is keeping watch, and then the blind is doing the walking or whatever with the guidance of the lame? It still sounds like a very inefficient system, if you ask me. But another interpretation, I think makes a lot of sense, is that the Jebusites, Jerusalem as we know it today, and also as we know it in ancient times, and the more and more they reveal, Jerusalem has, it's a naturally fortressed city. Plus, there was always, from ancient times, had huge stone walls. So you have part of the city is up on a hill. It's surrounded by valleys, which puts the city at its terrific advantage. You have stone walls around it. And therefore, it could be a statement of the Jebusites saying, we are so powerful and so impenetrable that we put lame and blind people to be our guards, because what they're really saying is we don't need guards. That's how confident they were in the impenetrability of Jerusalem. And so basically, when it says later that the lame and the blind who are hateful to David, that is why they say no one who's blind or lame may enter the house. Then, I mean, that sounds like really nasty. And that was never David's policy. I mean, it wasn't like people who had a handicap couldn't enter, Jerusalem or something. But many interpret this to be, again, he took the idea of lame and blind to become a symbol of the Jebusites in a way of mocking them. And therefore, what he's basically saying is no Jebusite will be allowed to come into the house. There are other explanations as well, but I found this to be the most reasonable. But I don't know, maybe let me just see if I have any other. Oh, and another interpretation that I saw was that basically he was saying, we will fight. That's what the Jebusites are saying. We will fight until the very last man, including even our lame and our blind. Okay, they were very determined not to let them come in. Okay, now let's look at this. Basically, what it says here: anyone in verse 8, anyone who strikes a Jebusite or the lame and the blind, but it doesn't say what will happen to them. Usually, it's like all who would strike will get a prize, and there's nothing here. It just like kind of ends in the middle of the sentence. However, if you go back to Chronicles, again, the same story that is being told in Chronicles, there it is filled in. First Chronicles chapter 11, verse 6. Okay. And it says here, David said, whoever attacks the Jebusites first, and here it doesn't have the blind and the lame, just whoever attacks the Jebusites first will be the chief officer. Okay, so that makes sense, but it's interesting it doesn't have the lame, which kind of strengthens this idea of the lame and the blind being representative of the Jebusites, because it's missing here in the Chronicles thing. And it could be they saw it as, well, of course, that's what he's saying. It's just talking about the Jebusites. You don't need to especially mention the lame and the blind. But anyway, and then who did it? Yoav, son of Tzeruiah, attacked first and became the chief. So that's the part of the story that is missing in Samuel, which makes a lot more sense. But anyway, I do think that this message here in Samuel is very important, this whole lame and the blind, because it's part of showing us how David becomes a powerful king, about his confidence, about his ability to go forward and attack and capture a Jebusite city, which was considered so difficult to capture. And it's a fact. Joshua and Judges, all of those books are full of, attacks, captures, whatever. The Jebusite city was never captured. And it's mentioned in the beginning of Joshua and in Judges that this city was never captured. So why wasn't it captured? I guess they thought it was too difficult. So there's something, and Saul never captured it. So I think it's very significant because it's a way of saying to us, not just that David and Jerusalem are tied to each other, but it was waiting for somebody with the boldness, with the confidence, with the talent, with the brains, with the strategic abilities, number one, not to be frightened by this city, by Jerusalem. And number two, to come up with this brilliant idea, go through the water channels. So that I think is important for here. Okay, verse 9. David occupied the stronghold and renamed it the city of David. David also fortified the surrounding area from the Millo inward. David kept growing stronger, for the Lord, the God of hosts, was with him. So, first of all, about these places, if any of you have been to the city of David, picture the city of David. The city of David is south of the Temple Mount, okay? The city of David is Jerusalem, is the place that is, let's say, we talk about going to the old city, the Jewish quarter, the Christian quarter, that area, that is not part of First Temple Jerusalem. That's out of the city. It's something else, okay? Well, the city of David is south of Jerusalem. It's low down, it goes as far down as the Kidron Valley, and then it comes up the hill, crosses the road that is that road that surrounds the walls. It crosses the road, and then you end up going into Dung Gate, and you have the Temple Mount is right there. So if you're standing from the city of David, okay, you look north, you see the Temple Mount. That is Jebus. That is the city. Okay, it's lower. As you go up, you're hitting almost the level of the Dung Gate. That's higher up. That's where there would have been some kind of citadel. That would have been David's citadel. Today, when we call David's citadel was up there by Jaffa Gate, that's not David's citadel. David was not there then. It was farmland. I don't know what it was, but it was not part of David's city. They call it David's citadel probably because they have the name from the Bible, and why not? And it's the citadel of Zion, and it is near Mount Zion, so maybe, I don't know, but it's not there. Okay, David's citadel that we have here is no longer with us. Maybe they'll find the foundations of it, and they'll continue digging there in the city of David. But just to make it clear what it is, the Millo means filling. It's not quite clear what it is. It may have been a garbage dump, landfill, something like that. That would have been in between the city of David and the Temple Mount. So it includes that, and it's just a representation of how David keeps going stronger. And why? Because the God of hosts is with him. And that, of course, is very, very important. Okay, 1 second. Let me just see if I've left out anything before we go further. Yeah, that's it. Okay, so now suddenly we have Jerusalem, when all is good. Now what are we going to do with Jerusalem? And we right away have King Hiram, or Hiram in Hebrew, king of Tyre, sent envoys to David with cedar logs, carpenters, and stonemasons, and they built a palace for David. Thus David knew that the Lord had established him as king over Israel and had exalted his kingship for the sake of his people Israel. So picture this. David has just become king. Until now, he started out as a shepherd. He then became this, for a while, he was Saul's chief army guy, but he became his chief army guy by using a slingshot. Okay, we know he's small, he's short. This is not the image of a major general. He's clever, and he's very good at running guerrilla warfare. Okay, then he's running away from Saul. So he's, again, that's more like guerrilla warfare. He knows how to step one step ahead of Saul. He's never been really the head of an army in any serious way. Yoav, was his chief of staff. He ran his military campaigns. He's new as a king. He was 7 years in Hebron. He has just now reunited the kingdom. He just now captured Jerusalem. But even that, he didn't come with this huge army to lay siege to Jerusalem and break down a wall. He sent people in through the water pipes, okay? And now he becomes king. It's really amazing. I mean, the way he acts, the impression we have is of a guy who's become king of a little backwater kingdom somewhere. Not important. And yet we have the king of Tyre, which is like just off of the coast of Lebanon there. These were Phoenicians, probably, okay? Paying attention to David without David asking for anything. He took it of his own. He says, "Oh, I'm going to help you out. I'm going to send you the cedar." Oh, my goodness, cedar trees, right? In the ancient world, that was the most valuable wood. I'm going to send you cedar trees. I'm going to send you carpenters, stonemasons. They come and they build a palace for David, okay? And David is sitting there going, "Oh, my gosh, this is amazing." And what is his conclusion? And this is what's so amazing about David. He realizes that this is unusual because he's not a big king yet, right? He's not an emperor. He's not whatever. And yet he doesn't say, "Oh, that Hiram, he must realize how brilliant I am. Look at how my strategy worked. And I went into the water system and I conquered the Jebusites." What does he say? No. I get it now. I know from this that it is God who has established my kingdom. That is what makes David, David. Okay. On the one hand, he takes initiative. He doesn't sit around sitting back on his easy chair and say, "Okay, God, do your thing, make it happen." He takes initiative. He comes up with strategies. He's creative. He's, not waiting for God. But on the other hand, when he succeeds, he immediately understands that this is all from God. After he left Hebron, wait one second. Next, verse 13. After he left Hebron, David took more concubines and wives in Jerusalem, and more sons and daughters were born to David. These are the names of the children born to him in Jerusalem: Shammua, Shobab, Nathan, and Solomon, Ibhar, Elishua, Nepheg, Yaphia, Elishama, Eliada, and Eliphelet. So we have a whole list of sons, and we know for a fact that these sons were not born now. Why? Because it includes Solomon. Now, we know the story of Solomon. When he's born. We know this is later, and it's after Bathsheba, and there's still a baby before him that dies. And, that happens later. So this is a verse that is out of order. Okay, this kind of summarizes things that happen much later. But it's put here for a reason. It's put here because what have we learned now? David has become king. He succeeded in conquering Jerusalem. That's significant, okay? And we see that he's starting to be recognized and the international scene as an important king. So this is an interesting time to say, okay, this was his life. He settled after Hebron. He came to Jerusalem. In other words, Jerusalem was not a passing thing. Jerusalem is where he settled, and this is where he had his family and his children, and etc. We will take up with this next week. I guess we'll start with chapter 7, with verse 17, where he takes on the Philistines. And I will just say that we have been studying and reading about the Philistines ever since the book of Judges. The Philistines have been an ongoing thorn in the side of the nation of Israel. Battles, struggles, troubles. And we just heard about the Philistines just earlier, right? So it would have been maybe 8 years earlier, shall we say. He's 7 years king in Hebron. He becomes king in Hebron right when Saul dies. When does Saul die? As he's fighting against the Philistines. Okay. So the most recent time we've learned about the Philistines is just 7 or 8 years earlier. All right. And here we're going to see the final engagement with the Philistines, because it is only David. And so it like really fits with everything we're doing now. It is only David out of all those leaders that we've had that tried to engage and defeat the Philistines. At most, they got a temporary reprieve. But with David engaging with the Philistines, that will be the end of the Philistines. They will no longer be a challenge or trouble to Israel in any way. I mean, history tells us that they remained a presence along the coast, but they were never a threat after this. That was it. All right. Any questions or comments?
No, I was just thinking it's strange that they the word for lame is pischim, peser, when it's a different.
Yeah,
it's a very different meaning for now, isn't it? I mean, to skip or to leave out, or I don't know.
I didn't even think of that, because Pesach, yeah, we use it for the word for Passover.
Yeah.
Pesach is to pass or to skip. Right.
Skip,
not skip like skip, with your feet, just to skip something.
Leave out,
No, that's interesting. I never even thought of that, being connected like that way.
Yeah.
But it could be that there's something in the limp or something like that of someone who's lame. They can't walk, or they walk. That has something to do with not straight walking, like you skip or something like that. But I don't know. I've never studied that. That could really be interesting. Why it's that.
Sondra,
Yes.
Thank you for explaining to me how we arrived from the city of David to the Temple Mount. Between that, where exactly was the Milo? Is it between those two places?
Okay, so this is what I've read. If you picture Israel, Jerusalem today.
Right.
Okay, so when you go to the city of David, let's start backwards. You're coming from the Western Wall. You go out the Dome Gate. Okay, there's a road there. You cross the road. You go a little down the hill, and then you turn, and you continue down the hill, and you get to the city of David. So basically, there's a downhill going from the Temple Mount down to the city of David, with a road in between that you have to cross. Today's road. Okay. So the theory is that the Milo would have been around where the road is today, but much lower. Everything we see today is much higher than it would have been at this time, because it's layers of stuff. Okay. So right across that road, just west of the city of David, okay, there used to be this huge parking lot. I don't know if any of you remember, let's say 15, 20 years ago in Israel, there was this huge parking lot there. And then they closed off that parking lot, and they've been digging there. So today it's dug all the way down, and they haven't even gone down to the lowest level. But they've dug. And so it's very interesting, because if you think about it, that would have been a layer much closer to the level of the city of David. Okay, so the Milo would have been higher than that. And so if you picture people living down there in that city of David, and the Milo was a place where they kind of dump things, like they dump their garbage or they dump things. It makes sense that at least it became higher, because if they were dumping it, maybe, it rose up and there's stuff. Now, no one's dug under that road, but that's just a theory. I don't know why that is the theory, but that's the theory.
Thank you for explaining it.
You're welcome.
I was trying to picture it,
Yeah. I have trouble, I've done a few tours in City of David, and it's a lot there. So you never see it all at once, a piece of this or a piece of that. So I did a tour once with one of the archaeologists that has really dug there. His name is Shukrun, very well-known and highly respected archaeologist there in Jerusalem. And so he was there, and I actually went with him, where he showed us this water area, which he thinks might be this tzinor, this pipe.
I've been there. I've been to that water place and the aqueduct on the ground. Yeah.
Right. So anyway, and he's standing there and then he's explaining, how this fits in north, east, south, west, and there and that. And I'm totally turned around. I have no idea what he's talking about because you're sitting underground where that water thing is, and
Mhm.
he thinks you know it by heart and you understand what's north, south, east, and west. And I was like, you lost me, honey bunch. I have no idea what you're talking about. So it's very confusing sometimes.
Yeah.
On
Yeah, great.
YouTube,
Yes, fine.
there's several tours where they take you underground, where they go down all those tunnels so I haven't actually been down there, but I've been on the underground tunnels through these, where they go
That's
through
great.
these tunnels. And I'm just looking a map in the back of my Bible, and it's showing it shows you the Gihon Spring
Yeah,
and
that's
Hezekiah's
down below.
tunnel going through to the pool of Siloam.
Right.
And it's putting that as being in the city of David.
It's the edge of the other edge. In other words,
Yes.
if the Temple Mount is one side outside the city of David,
Yes.
if you continue, then you go to the beginning of City of David and you continue to go down, 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 down. That's when you get to the pool of Siloam and the Gihon Spring.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So these waterways are that. The waterways are bringing us the water. The Gihon Spring and the Siloam pool are outside the city.
Yes.
So basically, the waterway enables them to bring the water into the city. So that's how it was done. Now, one of the things I find the most amazing thing about the city of David, and I've heard this many times, and we were reminded again this time, it's great. So as I said, we were walking through this waterway that was really a drainage pipe, a drainage ditch, okay, going underneath the main road from the Second Temple period. And when they first excavated this drainage ditch, they found a little gold bell, okay, dating back to the Second Temple period.
Wow, one of the
And
priests
this is one of the bells
on the
from
priest.
the high priest's garments.
Mhm.
Now,
me.
if you know that one of the things they would do is they would have the bringing of the water and taking the water from the Gihon Spring, going up to the Temple Mount and pouring, it was like the water libation, pouring the water on the altar. So the high priest would be bringing it from there through this. So now he wasn't in the drainage ditch, he was on the road on top. Okay. And what is a drainage ditch? You have holes in the road for the water to go down and drain. So clearly at some point his bell fell off and fell into the hole down into the drainage ditch.
Wow.
And they found it. And I just find that's always so amazing. It's like this warm regards from 2,000 years ago. It's just like amazing.
Wow.
So is that near to Pilgrim's Way, which goes up to?
So the Pilgrim's Way itself is closed. They haven't opened it yet. It's above.
We've been up before it was open. Roy didn't realize that it hadn't opened.
Well, most of it I think is closed off. You can't go in there, but they continued it and they opened. That was, I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, U.S. ambassador to Israel, David Friedman, they made a whole thing where he came and he took a sledgehammer and he broke the final, and it was paper. It was just a symbolic thing. But that was when they completed the Pilgrim's Way, but it's not yet open to the public. So you get to just go underneath, not the above ground one.
Can I just pick up where you're talking about the high priest and the water? Because if you go sort of where it's down by the Western Wall and you go in those tunnels along there and you walk through those tunnels, as you're going along there, there's all, where the floor's glass, there's all water flowing underneath there, isn't there?
Well, that's rainwater fall off. There's no springs or natural water sources.
It's absolutely
it's the opposite side. Okay.
Yeah, the other, like up what would have been the other end, yes, where they made when you go through and you come out the other side. So yeah, when I went, I've been through a couple of times with different parties, and they said that was a river, underground river.
By the Western Wall?
Yeah, no, but the water isn't by the Western Wall. It's right at the other end. It was up what would have been the Antonia Fortress end, the Sheep Gate end. But So
That's
it's go under the
second temple. That's, you're talking about the upper city, right?
yes.
The second temple, upper
Yeah.
city.
Yeah,
Okay.
so what I was getting at, wouldn't the high priest have got his water from that end rather
No,
than
the
down?
water came from the other end. The
Right.
high priest went down to the Siloam pool.
Right,
That we know from our sources, that he
right.
went down to the Siloam pool.
Oh, it's
Even
quite a long
during,
walk.
even during the second temple period, when that city, the new city, the upper city, whatever, when it was very in existence and priests lived there and everything, that was not where they got the water for the water libations. That was down below in the Siloam pool.
Mm. Because do you know where they say the Tower of David is sort of more or less opposite the western, right up opposite the western wall, where Herod's palace would have been, kind of thing. There's
Are you talking about what's today called the Citadel of David, David Citadel?
yes, there's
Okay,
tunnels.
so
Yes,
that's
up
way
there.
up. That's
Yeah.
right. That's next to Jaffa Gate.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
from there, under Jaffa Gate, there's
Yeah.
a Christian bookshop place, and under
Right.
there, there's tunnels that go all the way through and right underneath and come out near the western wall.
Right.
So we've been
Right.
had a look down there
Right,
again.
right.
with
But that's
no
all,
problem.
that's not David's time.
No,
None of that is
no.
David's time. That is all Second Temple period time.
yes,
Yeah.
Well, I don't know when it was, but I know there's sort of tunnels going under there.
Yeah, and
From
well,
the-
I haven't been. They just have reopened the David Citadel. There's a whole new museum there,
Mm.
and they've done a lot of. It's supposed to be amazing taking a tour through there now, and I plan of doing it soon, but we haven't had a chance to do it yet.
There's a plan model there of the city of David that I found very interesting to some sort of scale. Takes up about
Where's
half.
Where's
Um,
that?
Well, that's near the city of David, isn't it, Chris? Can you remember where we went
I
around
think
that? Model? Yeah, and it shows all the pool of Siloam and the citadel. It's like we've got a village in England called the
There is a Second Temple Jerusalem model that is
Mhm.
at the Israel Museum.
Yes,
Is that
I've
what
seen
you're referring to?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah,
called
that's the Second Temple
is-
city.
Oh, okay.
Now
No,
they will
I-
show you this is where David's city was, but
Right.
it's a different, that was not where everybody lived. Everybody lived, in the Second Temple,
Yeah.
they lived where the Jewish
Right,
quarter is.
Okay, yeah.
Anyway. All right. Well, I guess hope this
Thank
is
you.
all whet your appetite to come to Israel as soon as you can. I know it's
Thank
difficult
you.
time
We're
to come
looking
now,
forward.
but
Looking
were very
forward to
blessed to
coming
go
back.
last- We were blessed to go last year. We've been waiting for many years to go, and I had to wait till I retired. And it was literally, we were there this time last year. So, yeah.
okay.
We'll be
Well,
back
hopefully you'll be
by
able
the
to come
grace of
again.
God.
Pardon?
I said, by the grace of God, we'll be back.
Amen. Amen. And you'll let me know and we'll get together. We should do a Bible
Yeah.
class together in
Oh, that
Jerusalem.
would be lovely.
Yes.
That would be fabulous, Sondra.
Okay, great. All right. Bye-bye,
Thank you.
everybody.
Bye. Thank you so
Bye-bye,
much.